Anita Smithy's life is falling apart until she meets her Prince Charming.
Must be hard. Would you do that?
Robert couldn't see a damsel in distress without coming to the rescue.
He thought they'd created the perfect family.
For all of us just to bond together and be like the Brady Bunch, we were extremely happy.
You too. You're useless.
But it doesn't take long for Anita to reveal a dark side to her new stepkids.
She turned into a crazy, psychotic animal.
Everybody was afraid of Anita and afraid of the wrath that would come.
Nobody could truly imagine the terror Anita would unleash.
Pure evil, and that's exactly what she was.
It was a Cinderella story, but there was no happy ending for anyone.
I got the gun. I just had it pointed at him like this.
In the summer of 2003, the lives of 34-year-old Robert Klein and his young family are in a tailspin. Unexpectedly, Debbie, his wife and soulmate for the past 14 years, has passed away.
She had a massive heart attack and died in her sleep. It was devastating for him.
It opened up a gaping void in the family and turned their whole lives upside down.
Despite Robert's unimaginable heartbreak, the widower's primary concern is for his and Debbie's two small children, 5-year-old Stephanie and 2-year-old Eric.
Okay, buddy.
The first thing he said was that my kids don't have a mommy anymore.
Sweet dreams, buddy.
Eric is still too young to fully understand what's happening to his family. But for Stephanie, the loss of her mom is earth-shattering.
Losing my mom at such a young age impacted me big, and it was just really difficult because I had a childhood, but it wasn't a childhood that every child should go through.
It's a sad situation, and one that Robert was eager to fix.
Love you, Pumpkin.
For the sake of his children, Robert believes he needs to open his heart and home to another woman right away.
My brother is a fixer. He likes to sort through things to make it better. He wanted to meet somebody that could be a mother to them.
Robert wanted nothing more than to make his family whole again. That was his goal.
And a few months after Debbie's death, Robert thinks he's found exactly what he's looking for in a co-worker, the shy and unassuming 35-year-old Anita Smithy.
Oh, I already poured you some. I was looking for you.
They worked for a software company. She was in IT, he was in sales, and they hit it off. Robert clearly needed a shoulder to cry on, and Anita gave that to him.
Yeah, let's check them out here.
Hey.
So these are my babes. Okay. All right.
Turns out, Anita and Robert have a lot in common. Namely, she has 2 children of her own, Michael and Lisa, who are roughly the same age as Robert's kids.
Bye.
So precocious. But you know,
Robert begins leaning on Anita for mothering advice, and he soon finds that he sees her as much more than a friend. But there's a problem. Anita is still married. Although she claims that the relationship with her husband of 14 years is far from death do us part.
You shouldn't be doing that, okay?
I know.
She was telling him that he would strangle her and hit her and throw himself on the floor and have temper tantrums.
You don't deserve that, okay?
Once Anita tells Robert about her problems, true to form, he's eager to help her fix them.
Not only did he offer her sympathy, he took it one step further. He introduced Anita to his sister Belinda, who was a police officer familiar with domestic abuse cases.
The first step is to start the reporting process so that we can start documenting.
I would give her advice on things that she could do to get out of the house safely, information on injunctions and getting away from an abuser.
Belinda, a 7-year veteran in law enforcement, has seen this kind of situation many times before. She knows it often ends violently. Still, she quickly becomes frustrated with Anita because she isn't resolved to change the situation.
She wouldn't get an injunction. She wouldn't want me to get anybody to file a report. She never wanted to tell anybody. There was no want on her end to try to fix anything.
Anita's husband is never arrested or charged for any crime. And when Anita files for divorce, Belinda is surprised by how things unfold between them.
They have an amicable separation. They have joint custody of the children. Everything's fine. This doesn't strike Belinda as the way that physical abuse cases usually go.
There was things that just didn't add up. I had gotten to the point where I had felt that she wasn't upfront and honest. I felt like she was making things up to be a victim.
Belinda tells Robert about her concerns, that Anita may be lying to gain her brother's sympathy. It's a theory Robert chooses to ignore, because now that Anita is free from her marriage, she and Robert can completely focus on their romance. And there is one aspect of this new dynamic in particular that Robert is quite happy about.
Robert told me that she was exciting sexually. So, naturally, I said, that's great.
Part of their sexual activities involved rough sex, and when people are involved in those kinds of sex play, they have to trust each other and be very connected with each other.
Not long after they start dating, the widower thinks Anita is the one he's been looking for, and he's excited to share his newfound happiness with his children.
Anita! Hey, how you doing?
My dad said, I just want to let you know that I'm seeing this lady and she has 2 kids, and I want you guys to all get together and see if you guys like her.
This is Lisa.
Lisa, how you doing?
My young fellow Michael.
For Stephanie and Eric, Anita seems to be exactly what's been missing in their lives.
Yeah, Eric.
She was pretty. She looked like a mom, like a soccer mom. We really liked her. Her kids were nice.
Just seemed to be balance in his life again.
Robert can hardly wait to officially make Anita his wife, so he buys a big house where they can all live happily. When Anita's divorce becomes final, he proposes. 4 years after his first wife's death, Robert and Anita get married.
When they kissed, I started to cry, and I was really happy. It was like a Cinderella dream.
The Kleins finally feel whole again.
I felt good for him that he had found someone. We'd have a nice family together, and my dad would finally be happy.
Anita's 2 kids live with the Kleins part-time, and their days are soon filled with shuttling kids around to sporting activities and social events.
I mean, a normal family, having a mom and brothers and sisters and a dad to live with.
Don't push, Stephanie.
It just seemed like they were making the blended family work. And everything seemed to be good.
All right, let's get ready to go.
Then, a year and a half into the marriage, the honeymoon comes to a screeching halt.
That you think of me as a maid, because that's what I feel like. I feel like a maid.
Anita begins nitpicking every little thing. She seems to be always arguing with Robert.
Not gonna pick up after you.
She could take the smallest slight and turn it into an occasion to make an entire night miserable for everybody.
They would fight all the time over the littlest things: dinner, money, backpacks for school. Why is there a sock on the floor?
Excuse me, Robert. What is this?
That is the credit card bill.
Uh-huh. And you spent how much on your children?
Well, I had to buy them new clothes for school.
The content of what people fight about in marriages oftentimes is not what the arguments are really all about. They become symptoms of the problem. They're not feeling like this is the person they really hoped the person would be.
As the arguing between Anita and Robert increases, so do Anita's darker habits.
Drown yourself in the bottle,
Sure.
huh?
What other choice do I have?
She would drink a lot. It progressed to a bottle of vodka a night. She was rude. She had no volume button, and she had no filter at all.
Get away from me.
Give me the drink.
Get away from me.
And she was aggressive. I have seen her push him and shove him.
It isn't long before Anita turns her wrath on her stepkids.
You know, the two of you are useless. Just like your dad. Do you hear me?
Life with their stepmother is about to get downright scary.
Respect me, and I've had it. I am in charge here. Do you got it?
All of a sudden, something snapped and everything went downhill.
What was that sound that you heard upstairs? Yes.
It just got worse and worse and worse. She was crazy, crazy.
You're driving me crazy!
A year and a half into Robert Klein and Anita Smithy's marriage, life in their blended household
You
takes
two,
an ugly
You're
turn.
useless, just like your father. Do you hear me?
She starts complaining and doesn't stop until she's filling the house with this paranoid anger.
Pathetic.
And Anita's stepkids are about to become pawns in the couple's war.
When my dad wasn't home, she would start talking differently to us, being more aggressive, other than how she was when they first got married.
This is a disaster. Have you done your homework? Yes. I don't buy it.
She would not respect me and my brother as much. She would be one person away from home and then a completely different person at home. It was scary.
You. Clean. Help me.
Whatever it was that happened in Anita's mind had very little to do with the children and much more to do with her relationship with Robert. And when she couldn't somehow navigate a solution to that, the only avenue that she had was to take that out on the children.
Guys?
9-year-old Stephanie and 6-year-old Eric turned to their father for help.
What's going on?
It's Anita. She's being really mean.
I would tell him stuff is happening. You need to do something about this.
All right, I'm sorry, Pumpkin.
Robert is upset to hear how Anita is treating his kids. Still, he's determined to make his new family work. All he wants is for his home to be peaceful and happy.
It was like, Pumpkin, I'll do whatever I can. I will talk to her. I will make this work. Don't worry about it. Let Daddy figure this out.
But anytime Robert confronts his wife, Anita turns her anger back on
I don't like the way
him.
you talk to him.
You know, your kids are brats.
He was trying to keep peace within the family. And he felt that the discussions that he had with Anita about this were not very productive. They were fighting a lot about it.
Robert can only see one way to keep the peace and Anita happy.
Nothing.
He tells them to just try to stay out of her way.
Loss is a big thing for Robert. He's doing anything he possibly can to avoid another loss for him and his children.
She wanted us to succeed so that me and Stephanie could have a mother in our life.
No matter how hard Stephanie and Eric try, nothing seems to make Anita happy.
You're doing it wrong again.
They're walking around on eggshells all the time, trying to keep Anita from getting angry at things. But it turns out Anita doesn't need things to get angry at. She will invent her own.
I've told you 100 times.
Anita is particularly hard on Stephanie.
Stephanie was my brother's little princess. Anita was threatened by Stephanie, and I think she took it out on her.
Do it right.
Before, Anita had always included her new stepdaughter in everything. Now, she starts pretending Stephanie doesn't exist.
And Anita goes into the girl's bedroom and reads a bedtime story to her daughter, kisses her daughter goodnight, and ignores Stephanie.
One person will know for sure.
She would take them shopping and not us. I just didn't feel like I was accepted into her family.
Over time, Anita appears to do more and more to make Stephanie feel unwanted.
Mwah! I love the pink. All right, get in the car. We don't want to be late. Wait a second. Not you. What are you wearing? What are you thinking when you get dressed in the morning?
I always felt like anything I did was never good enough.
Or you want to embarrass me, is that it?
She would always say, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, blaming everything on me, making me look like the bad person, making me look like it was always my fault.
Go upstairs and you're gonna put on some something presentable.
With 1,000 little cuts, she's tearing away at Stephanie's self-esteem. And for a 9-year-old girl, that's just a horrible thing to do.
According to Stephanie, at times, Anita's behavior becomes frightening.
I asked you to put on something presentable and you put on this?
She would get mad at me. She would grab my arm and grab it really tightly and then yank. And that hurts. It would scare me.
It was getting so out of control. And she was just, every day, becoming more and more nasty and mean and manipulative.
Sometimes fairy tales do work out, but sometimes after a little bit of wear and tear, what's underneath the surface is something very destructive.
Stephanie and Eric are starting to feel like they can never let their guard down. And it gets much worse when Anita's children begin following their mother's example.
They would go and see their dad every other weekend, but when they were there, they would be the ones tormenting us. Physically, mentally, emotionally, verbally, anything you can think of.
Eric seems to be the prime target of his 4-year older and stronger stepbrother, Michael.
He would pick on me a lot and like mess with me. He's just being mean.
My brother was getting abused, like hit, like punched around. And it was a little scary at times because Eric is the type of boy that is more shy and holds everything in.
When their stepbrother crosses the line, Stephanie is often forced to protect Eric.
One time, he grabbed a pillow and sat on Eric until his face was blue. I tried to get him off and he punched me and he wouldn't move, he wouldn't get off of Eric. Anita did nothing about it.
That Anita just sat there and watched it. And I just remember them saying how hard it was that she didn't do anything to help them.
Two years into the marriage, Stephanie and Eric feel like they're completely on their own. Not wanting to rock the boat, they stay silent about their
Want some
troubles.
salad? I think I'm good. May I have some salad?
I was stressed out. I was always upset, but I always put on another face. I would be happy in front of everybody else, but when I went home, I would cry. But I never told my dad anything about any of this.
They just continued to hide these things that were going on. She knew that it would cause fights and arguments, and Anita would be mad. Everybody was afraid of Anita.
As it just got worse, I would isolate myself. I would be by myself. I would be alone. Because I didn't know who to talk to, I didn't know who to trust. I wouldn't really be a child.
The stress of the abuse also begins to take its toll on Eric.
It had gotten so bad for Eric that he would pick all of the skin off of his fingers and off of his mouth from the anxiety from living every day in that house with her. He didn't feel safe.
I had a knife under my bed because I used to get scared that something was gonna happen. Either something's gonna happen to my dad or myself.
Home is a place where you're supposed to feel safe. It's where you go to feel safe. And this is where they felt least safe. It was like living in a nightmare.
With no one else to turn to, the kids begin confiding in their Aunt Belinda about what's really going on at home.
It was heartbreaking because I didn't know what to do to fix it.
Belinda tries to talk to Robert about the situation, but like his sister, Robert doesn't have a solution. What he does know is that divorce isn't an option.
Hey, Anita is out of control. She is terrorizing.
It was important for him to feel like he had done everything that he could to not fail his marriage, to not fail his kids, and to not have let everybody down.
Thank you for this weekend. All right, good to see you. All right, thank you.
He still was looking for some sort of Band-Aid to fix this, but Anita couldn't be fixed.
As Robert looks for a way to make things right, life in the Smithy Klein household reaches a boiling point. On a seemingly normal weekday, an explosive argument breaks out between Robert and Anita.
Oh, please.
Me and Eric were downstairs. I heard fighting. They were screaming, yelling, stomping. And all of a sudden, you hear a crash.
We were scared out of our minds that something might have happened.
Suddenly, Anita is frantically running down the stairs.
She was screaming, "You hit me, you hit me."
I didn't hit you! You stop lying!
You're not gonna get away with it. I'm calling the cops!
In November 2009, the escalating war in Robert Klein and Anita Smithy's blended household suddenly takes a dark turn.
Anita comes running out of the bedroom, holding her face, telling her son to call the police that Robert had just punched her.
I can't believe you hit me.
I didn't hit you!
I'm calling the cops!
You're acting crazy! I didn't
My stepbrother said, "Don't touch my mom, don't touch my mom."
You're going to jail.
He was gonna call the cops on my dad and take him to jail.
Robert's kids, Stephanie and Eric, are stunned.
He would never hurt anybody like that. No, that just wasn't him.
I didn't hit you. Stop lying.
They all heard it.
Anita seems to be completely unharmed.
I didn't hit you.
There's no physical
You know what you did.
damage on her at all. But she's gonna accuse him of abuse.
Too many times.
Stephanie can see that this woman was not punched. There's not even a red spot on her face. Why is she doing this? What's in it for her? Why the act?
I didn't hit you. Stop lying. I hit the wall,
Children,
okay?
don't believe him.
Just
don't listen to
Just
him.
relax.
All
Stop
of us.
going crazy. You're
Robert tells the children that Anita is lying, that they'd only had a verbal fight.
relax, okay?
No, I've had it.
He decided, I can't do this anymore. And he told Anita, that she needed to move out.
Listen, I'm done. I'm done. I want you out of here.
You're done?
I'm done.
Oh, you bastard.
She got violent with him and grabbed him by the side of his face, by his ears, and tried to bite his face.
And he pushed her arms away. Anita ran out the door yelling that he hit her.
You hit me!
Robert claims that the loud crash the kids heard before all hell broke loose was him punching a hole in the wall out of frustration. Anita's story, on the other hand, has a familiar ring to it.
Me in her own house.
Just relax.
And she would say things about her ex-husband that I don't even think were true. And she's saying the same things about my brother that I know aren't true. She made herself the victim.
Stop saying I hit you.
You have done this
I
too many
didn't
times.
hit you.
And despite Robert's claims that he'd done nothing wrong, Anita calls 911.
The cops came. It was extremely scary because I was mostly worried about my dad. I was afraid that I was never gonna see him again.
Robert isn't arrested, but the episode is the final nail in the coffin for Anita and Robert's 3-year marriage. Soon after, Anita and her kids move out of the house.
My brother cashed in part of his 401k and gave her the money so she could go find a place to live.
The Kleins are once again on their own, and with Anita and her kids living somewhere else, life quickly returns to normal.
We were back to just me, my dad, and my brother. It was less stress, just like a normal childhood.
I wasn't that scared anymore because nobody was there other than the two people I trusted the most in my life.
My brother could hopefully, move forward and not suffer anymore.
What Robert's family doesn't know is that he isn't ready to completely let go of Anita. Although the couple is separated and moving toward a divorce, Robert and Anita aren't willing to give up their intimacy just yet.
Robert, he would come over her house every Monday night. They would get together and they had sex.
They can't give up that raucous sex life. It's easier for Robert to keep the sexual relationship he has, but try to keep it separate from the rest of his life.
They couldn't solve problems in a healthy way, couldn't connect with each other in a healthy way, and when things started to come apart, they couldn't separate in a healthy way.
Anita and Robert no longer work together, and in between their Monday night meetings, Robert confides in friends that Anita is acting strangely.
He was getting some pretty nasty text messages from her. He told me that she was saying that she hates him and that just terrible things about him, and how that just the anger that was coming through in these messages.
When he's not home, he says she's breaking into the house and taking things. She's showing signs of really scary behavior.
And I told him, I said, look, man, you need to be careful.
Nothing to worry about.
Anita still has a key to the house, and Robert starts talking about changing the locks. Belinda grows increasingly uncomfortable with the situation her brother is in.
I had conversations with him. I said, you just need to stop and get away from her.
All the concerns fall on deaf ears.
I think that my brother really loved her, but the reality of who Anita really was started coming out. I think my brother was trying to hold on to the person that he thought she was.
Okay?
4 months after moving out, Anita shows up at Robert's house to collect some of her and her children's things.
Kids, say goodnight to Anita, okay?
Good night, Anita. They were talking for a little bit, and then my dad said it's time to go to bed.
I love you.
He said, I love you, Pumpkin. I'll see you in the morning.
Okay.
And then I said, I love you too, Daddy. And he kissed my forehead.
All right, buddy. I love you, man.
He hugged us and went to bed, and that was it.
Good night.
Can you help with anything?
No, I'm fine. Although, I could use some help setting up my TV.
All right, yeah, I got some cables. Cable right here.
Shortly after that, Anita goes home. Then, around 11 p.m., Robert leaves a sleeping Stephanie and Eric.
He went over to Anita's house with a bag of cables and stuff for the TV.
Several hours later, Anita makes a frantic call to police.
911, do you please fire medical? Okay. What's going on? Who did you shoot? Your husband? He was trying to touch me. Okay. And why did you shoot him? Did he hurt you? He tried to stab me.
When police arrive on the scene, they find the battered and bloody Anita waiting for them outside her house.
Anita was a mess. Face is bruised, she's bleeding, she's holding a towel that's soaked through with blood to the left side of her belly.
Inside Anita's house, police find Robert lying naked and dead on the bedroom floor. There are 2 bullet holes in his body and a small knife lying beside him.
He had a knife. I thought he was gonna kill me.
She says that he stabbed me, I had to shoot him.
She felt that her life was in danger. He was attacking her, and she had no other choice.
Investigators contact Robert's next of kin.
My phone rang about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Hello?
And when I picked it up, somebody said, Deputy Klein. There's been an incident, and Robert has passed.
What?
My first thought was that she had killed him.
No.
Detectives ask Belinda to help them inform Robert's children.
I'll be right there.
Belinda meets the police at Robert's house, where she breaks the news to her niece and nephew.
She squatted down by me, looked me in the eyes, and said, Daddy's gone. Daddy's dead. And I started screaming, did Anita kill him?
And she said, if Anita hurt him, I'm going to sue her.
12-year-old Stephanie and 9-year-old Eric are orphans.
We'd already lost her mother. I've been able to grow up with my dad. I had known a lot more about him than I had my mom, so it was really hard.
While the Klein family tries to process their loss, Anita heads to the Oviedo Police Department to give her statement.
Kind of explain to me what your day was like yesterday, what you had done.
She claims that around 11:30 p.m., Robert had shown up uninvited at her house. He said that he was there to fix Anita's broken television.
He brought a bag with TV cables in it, and he's got the tequila, like in his hand. And he's like, you know, let's have a drink. Let's, you know, do a shot of tequila or whatever. Everything was fine.
Fine.
And then, you know, he starts, you know, making out with me. So then I'm thinking, okay, he wants to have sex, so this is what we do, and we'll go home.
Anita and Robert end up in bed having sex.
Okay. I'm free to go. I have to work in the morning.
Let me go.
It's time for you to go. Listen to what I'm telling you.
And after sex, she asks Robert to leave. She says that he wouldn't leave.
Robert, I'm not...
Anita claims that Robert demanded she have sex with him again.
I'm just telling him no. I'm just telling, I'm just telling him no.
He's not really getting aggressive at all.
He is getting aggressive at this point.
Okay.
He is getting aggressive at this point.
Okay.
Robert, stop it!
According to Anita, the situation ultimately turns violent.
All of a sudden, he's got this knife, and I didn't know where it came from, and I wasn't sure where this knife came from. I felt like at that moment, is he threatening to kill me? Like, what is he doing with the knife? I don't understand what he's doing. He's like really like above the top, like angry. And but the knife is like, there's a Kleenex, and he's got the knife like this, with the Kleenex around it. And then he does like kind of like this number, like here, like just not cutting me, but just barely, like this number right here.
Anita claims that while Robert held the knife to her throat, he began raping her.
Stop it! I mean, he started having violent sex with me, like anal sex.
You're hurting me.
She began searching for a way to protect herself.
And I'm telling you, it hurts.
Okay.
And, you know, at that point, he turns around because, like, when we have sex, we use coconut oil, like, as a lubricant. So he turns around, and there's coconut oil on the edge of the bed. He turned around to grab it, and I could see his back.
Anita seizes the moment to grab a handgun from her nightstand.
I got the gun, and I put it under the pillow. He came back with the coconut oil and proceeded to have, sex, and it was very violent. And then I think that's the point when I was trying to talk to him, and I told him it hurt, stop this, or whatever. I think that's when he got mad and he hit me. And so he
hit you where?
He hit me like I think he hit me with his backhand like this.
That's when Anita claims she pulled the gun out and held it up to Robert's body.
I just had it pointed at him like this, just pointed at him like
up against the skin though.
Yeah, but because he was really close, and he was really close, and he came down. It felt like he came down on it.
Meaning he moved it.
She shot 3 times, missed once, hit him in the arm once, and once shot him fatally in the chest.
He went on the floor and went almost immediately unconscious, and he was dead within a matter of minutes.
Anita claims that she never meant to shoot Robert. She just wanted him to stop hurting her and leave.
But I mean, I didn't want to kill him because I mean, as crazy as it is, I miss him, and I love him.
Despite Anita's remorse, investigators know she isn't being totally honest with them. She said that she called 911 within minutes of firing the bullets that killed Robert. The forensic evidence suggests her estranged husband had been dead much longer.
When the paramedic got there, my brother was already cool to the touch. And the blood had already started to pool with lividity.
This guy's been dead for hours. So there's a gap in her story, and she has nothing to fill that gap with.
Detectives know that parts of her story don't match the evidence found at the crime scene.
You said the coconut oil was on the bed. When we went to your house, we found it in the bathroom.
How did it get there?
I thought it was on. I think it's on. I thought it was on the bed.
No, it's in the back.
Well, maybe he went to the bathroom and grabbed it instead of rolling over on the bed. I know, like when he. I don't know.
Well, you would have known if you got up. Listen, Anita. All I want is the truth, okay? I'm not trying to get you,
You know
in
what?
trouble.
I just shot my husband, and I don't know. You guys are trying to trip me up. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Even if Anita is traumatized and confused, her version of events doesn't make sense to investigators.
Why not leave?
What do you mean leave?
Why not get up? Why not try to get away? If you had the gun already, why not point at him and tell him to leave or anything?
Because I told you I wasn't prepared to use the gun. I mean, I just wanted to put it under the pillow in case I needed it.
She had an opportunity at that point to just get up and run, but she waits for him to come back. The rape continues, and that's when she shoots him. It doesn't quite jive.
Not only does Anita's story about the gun seem odd, but Anita can't pin down how and when she was wounded by the knife.
The fact about the knife, it's real, blurry. Where the knife comes from, where it goes, how do you sustain?
I don't know. I don't really know how that all happened. Honestly, I don't know how that all happened.
She told maybe 5 or 6 different versions of what happened.
I don't know. I don't remember it going in. I don't remember it going in, but we did wrestle. We did fight over the knife.
He stabbed her. He was raping her. It sounds like a monster. But the overall macro details of that night just didn't really match up.
It takes investigators less than 2 hours before they finally hear what they believe is the true story of what happened in Anita Smithy's bedroom.
How did you get stabbed? I need to know that. I need to know the truth.
Florida detectives have been pressing Anita Smithy on the inconsistencies in her story about her husband Robert Klein's death when she finally makes a stunning revelation.
How did you get stabbed? I need to know that. I need to know the truth.
After I saw he was on the floor.
Okay. After you'd already shot him? Where did you get the knife from? Where was it laying?
I don't remember where it was laying. I just know that I freaked out and I picked it up and I
you
stabbed
myself.
myself.
Okay.
She finally came clean and said that she, in fact, stabbed herself, right, and caused those other wounds.
Why would you stab yourself and then drop the knife by him?
Because I was freaking out.
But why drop the knife by him opposed to where you stabbed yourself?
I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I didn't plan this out. I wasn't thinking. I just panicked.
Okay.
She said, I shot him in self-defense, but I was afraid you guys wouldn't believe me. So I stabbed myself.
She set up the crime scene.
You freaked out, you stabbed yourself with the knife, and you dropped the knife right where you stabbed yourself. Fair to say?
I guess.
Well, is that what happened? You see the knife laying?
I don't remember that part. I don't remember exactly where I was standing, but I do remember dropping the knife right. Okay, here's his body. This is where, I remember dropping the knife.
Right next to his body.
I just remember I was shaking and I freaked out with the knife and I just dropped it.
After hearing Anita's confession, detectives believe that she killed her estranged husband in anger, not in self-defense. They believe that after the couple had sex, Anita snapped and killed Robert. Then, she came up with a story to explain the crime. Anita is charged with second-degree murder, giving Robert's family a belief that it's only a matter of time before justice is served. But when Anita is offered a plea deal, she turns it down.
And I picked it up and I stabbed myself.
Her defense lawyer learns that when she said that she stabbed herself, she had yet to be read her Miranda rights. So that stuff wasn't going to be able to be used in trial.
In a devastating blow to the case, Anita's confession is thrown out. 4 years after Robert's death, Anita is finally brought to trial. Without her confession, prosecutors face an uphill battle. Anita claims self-defense in the death of Robert Klein.
She tried to say that my brother was obsessive, almost stalkerish, and that he came in and brutally raped her, so she shot him.
Anita's wounds would seem to prove her story of sexual assault. The tables start to turn when one of Anita's friends testifies that the couple often enjoyed rough sex. Then, Anita's defense lawyer makes a fatal mistake.
He plays the 911 tape so the jury can hear her panic, hear how distraught she is. And during that tape, she says, "He stabbed me."
Dad, I think I killed him. Okay. And why did you shoot him? Did he hurt you? Yeah, he stabbed me.
This gives the state an opening.
The prosecution is allowed to refute what's in the tape. That allows in her admission that she stabbed herself.
Why would you stab yourself and then drop it off by him?
Because I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, I shot him because I was scared of him, and I have, you know, other than a few face wounds and and this right here, I have nothing to show for the, you know, the fact that I shot a man. Other than the fact that I'm scared, I mean, I have nothing to show. I mean.
That's when the whole story comes together, and all that other haze that was put in over the case about this other person that Robert was now sort of goes away. And that was just a magnificent turn of events.
It takes the jury less than 3 hours to reach a verdict. Anita Smithy is found guilty of second-degree murder. On February 2nd, 2015, she's sentenced to 40 years in prison. Stephanie and Eric's long nightmare with their stepmother is finally over.
I was ecstatic. It was so nice to know that she's been locked up for 40 years, never to hurt anybody again, never to hurt anybody I liked, loved, or cared for in my life, ever again.
But even with Anita behind bars, the woman Eric and Stephanie hoped would be their new mother has left behind scars that will never heal.
I miss just being able to talk to him about things that like a father and son would only be able to talk about. Always treasure the things you have in life. You never realize how much you'll miss somebody until they're gone.
Don't take your loved ones for granted, because no matter what, you can lose them in a split second and your whole life will change, and you'll never be able to say goodbye or I love you again. Learned it the hard way.
Despite everything that their stepmother put them through, today, under the care of their aunt, the Klein children are thriving.
I think that my brother would be happy that his kids are doing so awesome and that they're getting to live that life, you know, that he wanted for them.
I have a home, I have a safe place, I have a family, and she's never going to see her kids graduate.
It began as these things sometimes do, with the smallest and most ordinary gesture in American life, a hand reaching into a medicine cabinet, a cap turning beneath tired fingers, a few capsules shaken into a palm in the soft light of a kitchen or bathroom where nothing looked wrong. In 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area died after swallowing extra-strength Tylenol capsules that had been laced with cyanide. And the crime shattered something larger than public confidence in a brand. It shattered the quiet, inherited belief that danger announces itself with a face, a voice, a footstep in the dark, that evil enters by force and not by disguise. The poisonings were never solved, and their aftermath remade the look of everyday medicine in the United States through recalls, anti-tampering laws, and the now familiar seals and barriers that promise the package in your hands has not already been entered by someone else. But the deeper wound was stranger and harder to seal. Once the country had seen death arrive in a store-bought bottle. Once it had learned that murder could borrow the shape of an accident and the anonymity of commerce, some killers understood that lesson too. In the years that followed, There were cases in which domestic murder wore the mask of public terror, in which husbands or wives were marked for death inside homes already dim with resentment, greed, fatigue, or fear, and the killer tried to scatter suspicion upward into the crowd by imitating the logic of the Tylenol panic. That is what makes these crimes so haunting. They do not begin with an alley, a gun, or a screen. They begin with routines, with a headache after dinner, with a cold on a rainy afternoon, with a spouse standing close enough to touch, speaking in a calm voice, perhaps even fetching the bottle. The genius of the disguise, if such a word can be used for something this cold, lies in its theft of intimacy. A domestic murder is already inside the circle of trust. The medicine bottle lets that murder turn trust itself into the weapon. The scene is not a battlefield but a home where the sink is still wet from washed dishes, where the television hums in another room, where the dog shifts in sleep beneath the table, where yesterday's mail lies unopened beside a bowl of keys. That is where the body begins to fail. That is where a pulse stutters, and the skin changes color, and the air in the room seems to thicken with a confusion that feels almost insulting in its banality. People expect catastrophe to arrive with warning. These deaths arrived looking like discomfort, dizziness, a sudden weakness, a collapse no one could place in the first terrible seconds. The eye searches the room for an answer and finds only ordinary things. A lamp, a dish towel, a box from the pharmacy, a spouse saying they do not understand, a spouse already understanding far too much. The original Tylenol murders taught the country that a killer could tamper with bottles after they reached store shelves, turning the public marketplace into a field of invisible risk. Later domestic copycats understood something even darker. If fear had already been planted in the national mind, then private homicide could hide inside it. A murder in a marriage could be staged to resemble random tampering. A life insurance motive could be wrapped in the larger drama of an unknown madman moving through the retail world, poisoning strangers at will. In that way, the copycat did not merely imitate method. The copycat borrowed atmosphere, borrowed headlines, borrowed the public memory of panic, borrowed the nation's inability to tell where the danger was really coming from. In one of the most notorious of these later cases, Stella Nickell was convicted in connection with cyanide-laced Excedrin capsules in Washington state after her husband Bruce Nickell died, and another woman, Susan Snow, also died from the tampered product. Prosecutors argued that Bruce Nickell had been the intended victim, and that the additional poisoned bottles were placed on store shelves to make his death appear to be part of a random public tampering event. Years later, Joseph Melling was convicted in a Washington federal court after prosecutors said he poisoned Sudafed capsules in an attempt to kill his wife for insurance money and planted additional tainted packages so the crime would look like another wave of anonymous product tampering. 2 strangers died, and his wife survived after a near-fatal poisoning. These cases did not simply echo Chicago, they weaponized Chicago's shadow. History won't imagine the emotional geometry of that kind of crime. In a robbery, the violence comes from outside. In many domestic killings, it comes from a person whose habits have already been woven into the victim's day. Their footsteps are familiar. Their silence is familiar. The little rituals of shared life are familiar. The murderer knows which brand sits in the cabinet, knows whether the victim takes something for headaches, allergies, sinus pressure, a lingering cough, knows whether they swallow pills without looking, knows whether they trust the seal because everyone trusts the seal, knows how far the body can be guided toward danger before it senses anything at all. There is a special horror in the fact that nothing dramatic must happen before the killing begins. No struggle is required at the moment of administration, no forced entry, no broken glass. No witness may see anything more suspicious than one person shopping, or one person in the kitchen, or one person being helpful. Helpfulness, in these cases, becomes almost unbearable to think about. The glass of water placed beside the capsules, the suggestion to take something and lie down, the attentive face leaning over the bed as symptoms begin, the hand on the shoulder, the call for medical assistance made just late enough or made at once with perfect theatrical urgency, depending on what better suits the role. Domestic killers of this kind do not merely try to kill. They often try to author the story afterward. They understand that investigators do not examine only bodies and bottles. They examine narratives. So the narrative is prepared in advance. We bought the medicine recently. We had no enemies. We saw the news and realized the symptoms were similar. Could this be connected? Could this be one of those terrible random cases? The words may arrive haltingly or smoothly, but their purpose is the same, to push the crime outward, away from the house, away from the marriage, away from the invisible pressure that may have been building for months or years in closed rooms no neighbor could read correctly. And what pressure lives in those rooms? Money, certainly, insurance policies sitting in folders, debts hidden behind ordinary purchases, the humiliating arithmetic of a marriage that has become more burden than bond, resentment shaped by illness, addiction, disappointment, control, or the long erosion of tenderness. Some domestic murders are driven by immediate crisis, others by slow internal weather, a climate of grievance in which they come to see the other person not as a human being sharing the table but as an obstacle, expense, witness, or dead weight. Yet poison adds another layer. Poison is intimate in a way even other private forms of violence are not. It enters the body through consent or habit. It waits to be welcomed. It asks for trust at the final moment, and when it is hidden in medicine, the betrayal is doubled because medicine belongs to the category of things people use when they feel vulnerable. They reach for it when they are already in need of relief. The object promises care. The murderer uses that promise as camouflage. This is why the opening of such cases feels, in retrospect, dreamlike to surviving relatives and investigators alike. The first hours are often crowded with uncertainty, and uncertainty is fertile ground for deception. A man complains of feeling unwell. A woman suddenly collapses. Doctors search for causes. Family members gather. People speak softly in hospital corridors under fluorescent lights that make everyone look washed out and unreal. A machine blinks. A shoe squeaks on polished flooring. Coffee sits untouched in paper cups because no one's hands are steady enough to lift it. In those early hours, if cyanide or another poison has done its work cleanly and the scene has been staged to resemble a public tampering incident, grief and confusion help the lie breathe. The killer may stand among the worried, borrowing the visual language of shock. Perhaps there are tears. Perhaps there is great stillness instead, a rigid concentration that later seems suspicious only because hindsight is a cruel editor. At the beginning, hindsight does not exist yet. There is only a body in distress and a terrible question with no shaper on it. That shapelessness is important to understand because the copycat domestic poisoning case is not frightening only because of the death toll. It is frightening because it manipulates the first principles by which people assign meaning. We are used to separating public danger from private danger. A stranger contaminates products. A spouse harms a spouse. One threat belongs to the chaos of the outside world, the other to the hidden misery of the home. Tylenol-style domestic copycats collapse that distinction. They let a killer operate privately while borrowing the visual logic of randomness. They let one household's secret murder wear the costume of a civic emergency. They transform the marketplace into an alibi and the marriage into a trapdoor. That is why these cases feel so cold even decades later. They do not merely describe homicide. They describe impersonation. A killer impersonates chance. A crime impersonates a panic. A domestic motive impersonates faceless public malice. And all the while, the victim dies inside the radius of ordinary life, inside rooms that still smell of detergent, coffee, old wood, winter coats drying near a heater. Men fall from the very medicine that has become lethal. Think of an evening in one of those homes before anyone realizes what is coming. Maybe rain taps against the window in a patient rhythm. Maybe traffic hisses beyond the curtains. Maybe one spouse has a headache and says so without drama, because people say such things every day and expect nothing more consequential than a few minutes of discomfort. Somewhere in the house there may be a stack of unopened bills, an insurance envelope, a library receipt, a note with numbers written on it, a history of private arguments now flattened into silence. Somewhere in the mind of the future killer, the plan has already hardened past hesitation. The poison has been chosen because it can be hidden. The bottle has been selected because it belongs to a pattern of use. The larger public memory of tampering cases has been studied not as tragedy but as opportunity. The weather outside does not matter, and yet in memory it always matters. Families remember weather because weather is what remains when motive is still unthinkable. It was cold that day. It was raining. The sunlight was thin and gray. The heat came on with that knocking sound in the walls. The dog would not settle. The details endure because they were innocent, and because innocence becomes precious when everything else is contaminated afterward. That is the true landscape of these crimes. Not only the courtroom, not only the forensic lab, not only the headline that shocks a city for a week and then drifts into archive. The true landscape is the ordinary domestic world before it knows it has been entered by calculation. The cabinet shelf, the bathroom mirror with a faint streak no one wiped fully clean. The kitchen counter where groceries were set down. The soft rattle of capsules inside plastic. The moment before the seal is broken, or the moment after, when nobody can see the difference between safe and altered. In a country that learned to fear the stranger at the store shelf after the Chicago deaths, some of the most chilling copycats came from somewhere closer. They came from the breakfast table, the shared bed, the side-by-side shopping trip, the person who knew which medicine you reached for when you were tired, which one you trusted because it had helped before. That is where this story begins, not with an unknown hand placing poison in a bottle somewhere out in the dark, but with the recognition that the hand may already have been inside the home, drying dishes, folding laundry, discussing dinner, asking whether you wanted anything from the pharmacy, listening closely enough to know when your head hurt, and smiling in a room where nothing, at first glance, seemed out of place. By the time the domestic copycat poisonings began to emerge, the United States had already been changed by the autumn of 1982 in a way that was both practical and psychological. The Chicago Tylenol murders did more than kill 7 innocent people after they swallowed cyanide-laced capsules bought in ordinary stores. They altered the emotional contract between consumers and the objects they brought into their homes, and they forced companies, investigators, lawmakers, and families to accept that danger could be hidden inside a product that looked and touched useful and familiar. Investigators concluded that the Tylenol capsules had been tampered with after they reached store shelves, not during factory production. And the case remained unsolved even as it transformed packaging standards and helped drive federal anti-tampering law and tamper evidence seals into everyday American life. Wikipedia won the context for every later copycat case begins there, in that national wand, because once fear enters the routine gestures of medicine use, it does not stay confined to one city or one season. It moves into kitchens, bathrooms, pharmacies, hospital corridors, and family conversations. It turns a capsule into a question. It turns a headache remedy into a test of trust. It turns the act of opening a bottle into a moment, however brief, of hesitation. Before 1982, most people did not study over-the-counter medicine with suspicion. They bought it, stored it, and swallowed it with the same unthinking confidence they applied to salt, sugar, toothpaste, or a flashlight battery. Medicine belonged to the category of things made by experts, wrapped by industry, and sold through systems that appeared orderly, regulated, and distant from the private malice of individual human beings. That distance mattered. Americans were used to imagining murder as something that required presence, confrontation, and a visible human hand. The Tylenol deaths introduced a colder idea, one that felt almost modern in its impersonality, that someone could step briefly into the supply chain, poison anonymous strangers, and leave behind no face, no scene of struggle, no obvious narrative, only bodies collapsing in separate homes connected by a brand name and a bottle cap. The fear this produced was not just fear of death, it was fear of contamination, fear of unseen interference, fear that the protected spaces of ordinary life had become permeable. Even Halloween anxiety surged in the same season, as old myths about poison treats found fresh energy in a country newly aware of tampering. Wikipedia warned that atmosphere is essential to understanding what came later, because the domestic copycats did not invent their crimes in a vacuum. They inherited a ready-made national script. They understood that if a person died after swallowing capsules from a common store-bought brand, police would not automatically look first at the husband, the wife, the insurance papers. The resentments accumulated behind closed doors. They might first look upward. They might ask whether another stranger had moved through local stores. They might wonder whether the city was facing another public poisoning. In other words, the copycat killer did not need to create confusion from nothing. The confusion already existed in public memory. The Tylenol case had shown the country a form of death that appeared random, remote, and commercially mediated. A domestic murder could step into that image and use it as camouflage. This was not merely imitation of method, it was imitation of public fear. It was theater built around the expectation that investigators, journalists, and terrified consumers would first recognize the pattern from Chicago and only later discover that the true center of the crime was not a deranged stranger in the marketplace, but a familiar person, already living inside the victim's daily life. In that sense, the domestic copycat poisonings belonged to two worlds at once. They were intimate crimes rooted in marriage, money, coercion, fatigue, resentment, and control. But they wore the costume of public catastrophe. That combination gave them a uniquely chilling quality. A spouse could plan a murder in private while borrowing the emotional weather of a national panic. The method was efficient not only because poison could be hidden, but because the story surrounding poison had already been written in the American mind. By the middle and late 1980s, that story had acquired enough force that later investigators and prosecutors explicitly understood some poisonings as echoes of the original Tylenol case. In Washington state, Stella Nickell was later convicted under the federal anti-tampering law after prosecutors said she laced Excedrin capsules with cyanide in order to kill her husband Bruce Nickell and then placed additional tainted bottles into circulation to make his death appear to be part of a random consumer product tampering episode. Another person, Susan Snow, also died after ingesting poisoned Excedrin. The Washington Post, a few years later. Joseph Melling was convicted in connection with cyanide-laced Sudafed capsules after prosecutors said he tried to kill his wife for insurance money and planted additional packages so the poisoning would seem like the work of an unknown tamper. Two strangers, Kathleen Daniker and Stanley McWhorter, died, while Jennifer Melling survived a near-fatal poisoning. Wikipedia wanted to understand why such crimes could even seem plausible to the people who committed them. One has to linger over the social climate of the era. The early 1980s were a period in which consumer culture had become deeply normalized. Pharmacy brands were household fixtures, and trust in packaged products was broad enough that most families did not perform any ritual of suspicion before taking common medication. At the same time, American media had become increasingly capable of carrying fear rapidly across regions. A poisoning in one metropolitan area could become a national story within hours and reshape behavior far beyond the original crime scene. The Tylenol murders demonstrated exactly that. Bottles were pulled from shelves, warnings were broadcast, and the language of tampering entered everyday conversation. What had once been unthinkable became part of the public imagination. When an idea enters the imagination with that much force, it does not affect only the innocent, it also educates the calculating. Somewhere in the country, a person already angry at a spouse, already consumed by financial desperation or private hatred, could watch the panic unfold and see not only tragedy but possibility. Here was a murder weapon that could be disguised as a random event. Here was a method that did not require physical overpowering. Here was a way to make the home look like the victim of an outside threat. Here was a plan in which the killer could stand at the hospital bedside and appear to be suffering from the same shock as everyone else. The appeal of that disguise becomes even more understandable when one considers the awkward, morally cramped realities of many domestic murder cases. Marriages that end in homicide often do not resemble the dramatic explosions of fiction. More often they decay, they sour in increments, money runs low, drinking stops or starts, desire shifts. One person begins to imagine freedom not as separation but as removal. The spouse becomes a burden, a witness, a disappointment, an obstacle to new plans, an insured body, or simply the nearest target for years of unresolved bitterness. In many such cases, open violence carries obvious risk. Guns are loud, knives require proximity and often produce defensive wounds, blood evidence, and visible struggle. Blunt force is physically demanding and emotionally difficult to disguise. Poison, by contrast, has always tempted certain killers because it seems to promise distance from the act even while remaining intimate in delivery. Hidden in food or medicine, it enters the victim's body quietly. It can mimic illness in the early stages. It permits the murder to remain calm, to wait, to watch. And when it is paired with a pre-existing public fear, as in the Tylenol-style copycats, poison offers more than stealth, it offers misdirection. The domestic murder no longer needs only to kill successfully. The murder needs to narrate successfully. The product bottle becomes both weapon and script. That is why these cases belong not only to the history of homicide but also to the history of American consumer anxiety. The shelves of pharmacies in the post-Tylenol years became places where safety was newly dramatized. Wrappers, glued boxes, neck seals, foil barriers, and packaging statements all emerged partly because federal regulators and manufacturers were responding to what the Chicago murders had exposed. The FDA moved toward tamper-resistant and tamper-evident requirements, and the Federal Anti-Tampering Act made consumer product tampering a federal crime. U.S. Food and Drug Administration 3. The irony is bitter. The very measures meant to reassure the public also underscored how real the danger had become. Every seal was a reminder of the hands that might once have gotten inside. Every warning label testified to a new era in which innocence needed visible engineering. And yet no piece of packaging, however cleverly designed, could protect against the oldest danger in the room, the trusted person standing beside you. That tension lies at the center of the copycat domestic cases. On the surface, they are stories about tampered products. At their core, they are stories about marriage and deceit. The public saw contaminated bottles on the news, but the real engines beneath several of these later crimes were private motives so old they hardly needed modern packaging at all: greed, resentment, control, fear of losing money, fear of losing status, exhaustion with a spouse, hunger for insurance proceeds, and the cold imagination required to transform a partner's vulnerability into an opportunity. The social world around these crimes also made them easier to stage in another way. Domestic life often hides its fractures better than outsiders realize. Neighbors hear only fragments. Coworkers know only the public version of the relationship. Friends may notice strain, but not danger. A spouse who intends harm can still go to work, make jokes, shop for groceries, drive the same streets, and appear ordinary. The home itself helps the performance. Home softens suspicion. They contain rituals that look like care even when care has long since rotted from within. Cooking dinner, buying medicine suggesting rest, asking whether the headache has eased, even making the emergency call when symptoms worsen, all can be folded into the role of concern. Poison crimes exploit this ambiguity with exceptional cruelty. The victim often accepts the fatal object from a person whose daily habits are already woven into the texture of safety. The medicine is not snatched from a stranger, it is taken in trust. In that sense, the domestic copycat poisonings were not merely about reproducing a famous crime. They were about weaponizing ordinary tenderness, or at least the appearance of tenderness. The spouse who provides relief becomes the spouse who supplies death. The bottle in the cabinet becomes a bridge between national panic and private betrayal. When later investigators unraveled these cases, what emerged was not only forensic evidence but a portrait of a culture in transition. America was learning, bottle by bottle and seal by seal, that consumer safety could not be assumed. Law enforcement was learning that random-looking poisonings might conceal highly personal motives. Prosecutors were learning how to use new federal statutes written in direct response to the Tylenol deaths. And families were learning a harsher lesson still, that the invisible hand inside a tainted bottle might not belong to a faceless predator stalking store aisles, but to the person who shared the mortgage, the dinner table, the bed, and the future that now existed only on paper. The context, then, is larger than any single case file. It is a moment in American life when mass-market trust had been cracked open and not yet fully repaired, when law was racing to catch up with fear, when media memory was powerful enough to offer murder as a template, and when domestic motives could hide in plain sight beneath the louder drama of public alarm. In that narrow and terrible corridor between private grievance and public terror, the Tylenol-style domestic murder cases took shape. They belonged to an era of plastic pill bottles and evening news bulletins, of insurance forms and kitchen medicine cabinets, of spouses who knew each other's weaknesses too well, and of investigators forced to ask again and again whether a death that looked random had really begun in a far more familiar place. If this part of the story has a voice, it belongs not to the killers, not yet, but to the people whose lives were ordinary enough to be mistaken for safe. The tragedy of the Tylenol-style domestic copycat cases is that the victims did not stand at the edge of some dramatic underworld. They were not moving through scenes that announced danger in advance. They were living in the broad, familiar territory where most people live their whole lives, inside routines so common they barely leave an impression until something tears them open. Bruce Nickell came home to his house in Auburn, Washington, in June 1986 with a headache, the kind of complaint that belongs to the end of a workday and usually means nothing more than fatigue, stress, or the weather pressing against the skull. According to the case records summarized later in court reporting and historical accounts, he took for extra strength Excedrin capsules from a bottle in his home and collapsed within minutes. He died shortly afterward at Harborview Medical Center, and his death was initially attributed to natural causes associated with emphysema. Wikipedia won there is something almost unbearable in how small that sequence is. He came home. His head hurt. He reached for relief. He swallowed what he believed would help. Then the room changed forever. That is the first truth the victims seem to speak through these cases. They were not walking toward danger knowingly. They were walking deeper into the familiar. That same truth hangs over the death of Susan Snow, often identified in contemporary and later accounts as Sue Snow, a 40-year-old Washington bank manager who rose early on June 11, 1986, with a headache and took 2 Excedrin capsules from a bottle in her home. Her husband, Paul Webking, also took capsules from the same bottle for arthritis and went to work, and around 6:30 that morning their 15-year-old daughter, Haley, found Snow collapsed on the bathroom floor with a faint pulse. She was taken to Harborview Medical Center and died later that day without regaining consciousness. Wikipedia 1. In that scene belongs to spectacle. It belongs to domestic life at its most recognizable. A morning headache, a spouse leaving for work, a teenager moving through the house at the start of the day, a bathroom floor becoming, without warning, the threshold between ordinary life and irrevocable loss. When people later read these cases in clipped columns or hear them summarized in documentaries, what often disappears is the texture of those last ordinary moments. But that texture matters because it tells us who the victims were before they became evidence. They were people inside households with clocks, coffee cups, damp towels, unpaid bills, half-finished conversations, and habits so ingrained they could have performed them in near darkness. The victim's statement, if one can call it that, is hidden in those habits. It says, "I lived where I thought I was safest. I did what I had done before. I trusted the object in my hand because the world had taught me to trust it, and because someone close to me, or the structure of ordinary life itself, gave me no reason to stop." The original Chicago Tylenol victims had already taught the country that random tampering could turn strangers into casualties with horrifying speed. 7 people in the Chicago area died in late September 1982 after swallowing extra-strength Tylenol capsules laced with potassium cyanide. 12-year-old Mary Kellerman, Adam Janus, Stanley Janus, Teresa Janus, Mary McFarland, Paula Prince, and Mary Reiner. Wikipedia to those names matter here not only because they belong to the first national wave of poison capsule terror, but because their deaths created the script later domestic copycats tried to borrow. The copycats understood that once the public had seen strangers die from a trusted bottle, any later poison death connected to over-the-counter medicine might initially appear random. Yet for the later victims, the randomness was false. Bruce Nichol was not chosen by an unknown predator moving through stores at whim. According to the prosecution theory that ultimately led to Stella Nichols' conviction under the federal anti-tampering law, he was, prosecutors said, the intended target in a scheme tied to life insurance money, and the additional poison bottles were placed to make his death appear part of a wider tampering outbreak. Susan Snow, by contrast, was a stranger whose death made the disguise more convincing and the crime more terrible. Los Angeles Times 3. That distinction is central to the victim perspective. In these cases there are often 2 circles of victimhood. In the inner circle is the spouse or intended domestic target, the person whose daily proximity to the killer made the poisoning logistically possible. In the outer circle are the strangers drawn in to support the deception, people with no private argument, no insurance file, no marital history with the offender. People who simply reached into the wrong bottle at the wrong time. Both circles matter. Together they show the full moral architecture of the crime. The intended victim reveals the intimacy of the betrayal. The unintended public victim reveals the killer's willingness to sacrifice unknown lives merely to preserve the lie. That is why Susan Snow's death feels so sorrowful, even in summary. She seems to stand in these cases for the innocent bystander as consumer, the woman who woke up in her own house, tended to an ordinary pain, and by doing so became part of another household's concealed violence. The same pattern appears with devastating force in the Sudafed poisonings linked to Joseph Melling. In that case, federal prosecutors argued that Melling tried to kill his wife Jennifer Melling for insurance money by poisoning Sudafed capsules and planting additional tainted packages on store shelves so the crime would look like another random consumer tampering event. Jennifer Melling survived a near-fatal poisoning on February 2, 1991, while Kathleen Denneker, a 40-year-old woman from Tacoma, died on February 11th. And Stanley McWhorter, a 40-year-old man from Lacey, died on February 18th. Los Angeles Times for Jennifer Melling's survival changes the emotional register of this section, because at last there is a living human being on the victim side of the story. someone whose body crossed the threshold into death's territory and came back carrying the invisible fact of betrayal. Accounts of cases like this often move quickly to the prosecutor's theory, to timelines, to forensic chemistry and store tracing, and all of that matters. But pause for a moment with the experience at the center of it. A wife takes medicine she believes is benign, medicine available in pharmacies, medicine associated with relief. Her body reacts not with relief but with crisis. Somewhere in the aftermath of survival comes the second injury, the one language can hardly hold, the dawning possibility that this was not an accident, not bad luck, not a random contaminated package from the shelf, but an attempt from within the home, from within marriage, from within the ordinary emotional geography of trust. To survive such an attempt is not merely to live through poisoning, it is to be forced to reorder memory. Every helpful gesture from the past may begin to darken. Every offer of medicine, every act of concern, every errand to the store, every conversation about health or money can become suspect in retrospect. Survival, in such cases, is not a clean opposite of death. It is an extended confrontation with how close death stood and how familiar the hand behind it may have been. The victim's statement, in Jennifer Melling's case, would not only be about physical symptoms, it would also be about the afterlife of suspicion that follows survival. These victims also speak through the circumstances of discovery. Bruce Nickell collapsed minutes after taking Excedrin, and by the time he reached Harborview Medical Center, treatment could not save him. Wikipedia 1 Susan Snow was found by her teenage daughter on the bathroom floor and responsive, with only a faint pulse. Wikipedia 1 even reduced to skeletal fact, those details contain whole emotional worlds. A person collapsing in front of a spouse or inside a family home does not become a victim in isolation. The body falls into relationship. Someone sees, someone calls, someone kneels. Someone hears the panic in a voice that will never sound quite the same again. Someone rides in an ambulance or waits in a corridor beneath lights too bright for grief. The victim's suffering radiates outward immediately, often before anyone knows what kind of crime has occurred. A daughter finds her mother on a bathroom floor. A spouse accompanies a husband to the hospital. Another spouse, if involved in the crime, may perform concern while already knowing the truth. That unbearable asymmetry is part of the victim landscape too. The innocent do not yet understand the plot they have been pulled into. Their fear is genuine, raw, confused. They think first of sickness, stroke, heart failure, bad luck, anything but an intentionally poisoned capsule. Meanwhile, the hidden author of the scene may be standing close, already benefiting from the lag between collapse and comprehension. When one centers the victims rather than the perpetrators, the meaning of these cases changes subtly but importantly. They stop being only stories about clever deception, forensic unraveling, or anti-tampering statutes. They become stories about interrupted personhood. Bruce Nickell was not simply a name on an indictment. He was a man who came home from work with a headache. Susan Snow was not merely the second fatality that forced authorities to reconsider an earlier death. She was a bank manager, a wife, a mother, a woman discovered by her child in one of the most intimate and helpless scenes a family can endure. Wikipedia 1 Kathleen Danaker and Stanley McWhorter were not narrative collateral used by prosecutors to explain a tampering scheme. They were strangers living their own independent lives, absorbed without consent into a domestic murder plot designed elsewhere. Los Angeles Times for and Jennifer Melling was not merely the intended target who happened to survive. She was a woman whose continued existence became proof not only of attempted murder, but of the terrifying idea that domestic betrayal can inhabit the same bottle as public panic. There is another dimension to the victim's perspective that deserves attention: silence. Many homicide narratives are built around things victims said before death, found warnings, threats, final arguments, or visible fear. Poisoning often denies that clarity. Victims may not know what is happening until their bodies are already failing. They do not leave neat last statements about motive because motive has been hidden from them. They may speak only in the language of symptoms. My head hurts. I feel strange. Something is wrong. I'm dizzy. That very absence of dramatic foreknowledge is part of what makes the genre so cruel. These victims are not usually granted the dignity of understanding the danger in time to name it. Their final participation in the story is often ordinary speech colliding with extraordinary harm. The medicine cabinet remains closed behind them. The glass of water stands half finished. The room is still arranged as if the day will continue, but the body has already crossed into emergency. This silence also affected the way their lives were first interpreted publicly. Bruce Nichols' death, according to later accounts, was initially ruled natural, attributed to emphysema, until Susan Snow's death forced a reconsideration. Wikipedia one that means for a brief and terrible interval, even the fact of victimization remained obscured. He was dead before the truth of the method had fully surfaced. That too belongs to the victim's statement. Not only was I harmed, but the meaning of my harm was hidden at first. My death entered the world wearing the wrong explanation. Only later did investigators begin to strip that false explanation away. In the larger arc of the Tylenol-style domestic copycat cases, the victims therefore stand at the crossroads of three betrayals. The first is the betrayal of the body by poison, the chemical violence that turns a remedy into an assault. The second is the betrayal of trust, especially acute where the intended victim is a spouse or where the poisoning depends on the routines of shared domestic life. The third is the betrayal of appearance, the fact that the crime is deliberately staged to resemble something else, so that even the victim's death initially tells the wrong story. That triple betrayal is why these cases remain so haunting. The victims seem to vanish first into illness, then into confusion, then into a public narrative that must be corrected by investigation. To write them back into focus is to refuse that erasure. It is to remember that before the lab results, before the court findings, before the anti-tampering precedent, and the insurance motive, and the traced purchases, and the planted bottles, there were people moving through ordinary American rooms with headaches, colds, sinus pain, arthritis, fatigue, and trust. They opened bottles in kitchens and bathrooms because that is what people do when they want the pain to stop. They believed the object in their hand belonged to the side of care, not the side of death, and in that belief, they were not foolish. They were human. That, perhaps, is the clearest statement the victims leave behind across all these cases. They remind us that murder does not always arrive carrying the visible signs of menace. Sometimes it waits quietly inside the rituals of relief. Sometimes it comes disguised as help. Sometimes it enters the body through the same small motion that has eased pain 100 times before. And when the truth is finally uncovered, what remains most painful is not only how they died, but how completely they had the right to think they were safe. The incident did not arrive with the features people usually attach to murder. There was no forced door, no shouted threat, no lamp overturned in a struggle, no panicked footfall running into the night. It entered the house quietly and waited in the one place where relief is usually kept. A bottle stood where bottles always stand, among the practical objects of an ordinary life. And on it the rooms held their familiar shapes with such confidence that nothing in them seemed capable of treachery. The light fell across the counter the way it had 100 times before. The refrigerator hummed. A faucet dripped once, then stopped. Somewhere beyond the walls a car passed through wet streets, its tires whispering over pavement. In the bedroom a shirt lay across a chair. In the kitchen a cup sat half-rinsed by the sink. These were not dramatic rooms. They were domestic rooms inhabited by habits, softened by repetition, protected by the false dignity of routine. That was what made the incident possible. Murder had found a way to dress itself in the texture of the everyday. The victim came home or woke up or moved through the morning with the slight discomforts that accompany a human life, a headache, sinus pressure, a body asking for a little help. Pain on that level does not inspire caution. It invites convenience. A person does not prepare morally for catastrophe when the complaint is common enough to mention in passing. Head hurts, sinuses are acting up, need to take something. The words are small. The words belong to the maintenance of ordinary life, and because they are small, because they carry no prophecy inside them, the next gesture unfolds naturally. A cabinet opens, a drawer slides back, a bottle is lifted, capsules rattle softly against plastic like harmless things. The sound is almost insultingly normal. Somewhere nearby, perhaps only a few feet away, the other person is present. Present the way spouses are present in houses they share, neither intrusive nor absent, simply part of the scene. That presence may look like concern. It may look like nothing at all. It may be a glance from the doorway, a casual question, the movement of someone setting down keys or taking off a jacket. But inside that presence, hidden beneath the surface composure of domestic life, the plan is already complete. The bottle has been prepared. The poison has been measured. The timing has been imagined and reimagined. The killer has stood in these same rooms before and rehearsed the emotional weather to come. The moment now unfolding may look spontaneous to everyone else, but in one mind it has been long anticipated. That contrast is the center of the incident. For one person, a routine act of relief; for the other, the execution of a private design. The capsules are swallowed with water. No alarm sounds. No taste necessarily announces the danger in a way that can be understood in time. The body receives the poison as it would receive medicine, and for a few moments the world remains deceptively intact. That interval, brief as it may be, is one of the cruelest parts of the crime. The victim does not yet know the contract has been broken. The house does not yet know. Time keeps moving with obscene politeness. A clock continues its small mechanical work. A television murmurs from another room. A dog shifts and resettles. The entire domestic scene collaborates, unknowingly, in preserving the illusion that nothing irreversible has begun. Then the change comes, not with symbolism, not with cinematic grandeur, but with physiology. A wave of distress moves through the body. The stomach tightens. The breath shortens or catches. The head that already hurt now feels wrong in a deeper way, a way the victim cannot immediately translate. Dizziness gathers. The room pulls loose from its hinges of normality. Hands reach for support. A chair, a counter edge, a wall. There may be an attempt to speak, but what can be said at a moment like that? Something is wrong. I don't feel right. These are not the words of a person who sees murder clearly. They are the words of a person whose body has moved faster than understanding. If the victim collapses quickly, the scene shrinks into pure emergency. The person nearest may rush forward. That is one version. Another is more restrained, more watchful, more chilling in retrospect. But whatever the outward performance, the incident has by now crossed from preparation into irreversible fact. The poison is inside the bloodstream. The body is failing in real time. The victim bends, staggers, sinks, falls. The shoulder strikes a doorframe, a hand scrapes tile, a glass tips and spills. The sound is small, and yet after the fact families remember such sounds with impossible clarity because they were the last ordinary sounds before life divided into before and after. In one house it happens in the evening after work, when a man returns home with the fatigue of an ordinary day still on him. He complains of a headache and takes capsules from a bottle that has become part of the house by custom, not suspicion. Within minutes he collapses, and the violence of the internal reaction is so swift that the mind cannot keep pace with it. He is no longer simply a man with a headache. He is a body in crisis, a husband on the floor, a patient being transformed into an emergency before the furniture on him has even absorbed what it has witnessed. A phone is lifted. A voice becomes urgent. Help is requested. Perhaps hands try to steady in. Perhaps a name is repeated too many times, as if repetition can persuade a body not to abandon itself. When medical workers arrive, they step into a domestic tableau that outwardly resembles sudden illness. There is no visible intruder, no bloody evidence of attack, no obvious mechanism of violence. Only the bewildering spectacle of a person who was upright a short time ago and is now slipping away. This is one reason the incident in such cases is so deceptive. It borrows the appearance of medical misfortune. The first responders are asked to confront effect without visible cause. To them, at least at first, it may look like collapse, seizure, respiratory failure, cardiac disaster, some abrupt betrayal of the body from within. In a sense that is true. The body has been betrayed from within, but the hand that engineered the betrayal may still be standing inside the house, breathing evenly, speaking in the language of worry. In another house the incident unfolds in the pale beginning of day, when a woman rises with a headache and reaches for relief before the morning has fully assembled itself. The light is colder, that our rooms seem thinner, more exposed. The routines of breakfast, work, school, and departure are still arranging themselves. She takes the capsules because that is what people do before coffee is finished and the day begins in earnest. Nothing in that motion predicts that a daughter will soon find her on the bathroom floor. There is a special cruelty in morning incidents. Evening deaths arrive after a day has already spent itself, but morning deaths seem to corrupt possibility itself. The house still carries the shape of intended hours, errands, school, conversations, lunch, errands again, maybe a call to a friend, maybe a load of laundry, maybe plans not yet spoken aloud. All of that is silently erased when the poison takes hold. The bathroom becomes the stage for collapse, not because bathrooms are inherently dramatic, but because people seek them instinctively when the body feels wrong. The cold tile, the mirror, the sink, the private corner where discomfort can be managed. Instead it becomes the place of discovery. A daughter enters. A parent is on the floor, pulse faint, consciousness sliding away. Terror at that age does not arrive abstractly. It arrives in sensory fragments. The sight of a body where no body should be. The unnatural stillness. The confusion of half-open eyes or unresponsive limbs. The sound of calling out and receiving no meaningful answer. The sensation that the house has suddenly become foreign. The incident, then, does not wound only the direct victim. It wounds witnesses into memory. It fixes a family forever on an image it did not choose. There is another version of the incident, colder still, because it includes the deliberate extension of danger beyond the intended household. This is where the Tylenol-style domestic murder becomes truly monstrous. It is not enough for the killer to poison the spouse or intended intimate target. To preserve the disguise, other packages are altered and sent back into the stream of public commerce, where strangers may buy them, bring them home, open them under the sane innocent lights, and swallow death while believing they are merely treating a headache, a cold, a bout of sinus pressure. The incident in those homes is even more isolating because there is no domestic motive available to intuition at all. A stranger dies not because of any conflict in that house, not because of debt or resentment or marital corrosion, but because someone elsewhere needed a supporting cast for a lie. Imagine the woman who wakes with a headache and takes capsules from a store-bought bottle. Imagine her husband taking some too, though by chance surviving. Imagine the daughter who finds her mother collapsed. In that house there is no hidden family plot, no insurance motive nestled in a drawer, no poisonous intimacy. There is only the blind intersection between ordinary pain and another family's secret crime. That is how wide the incident spreads. It can begin with one person's private intention and end in multiple homes, each one struck by the same invisible mechanism for entirely different reasons. The strangers pulled into the scheme lend the incident its public face. They make headlines possible. They activate fear. They help the murderer hide the intended victim inside a larger wave of apparent randomness. And because the method is built on imitation of a national trauma, the incident carries a second layer of horror. It knows how it wants to be interpreted. It wants police, reporters, consumers, and families to remember the earlier panic and to place these new deaths under the same shadow. That means the incident is not only physical, it is theatrical. The poison capsule is the visible instrument, but the true mechanism includes narrative expectation. If several people in one area fall ill after swallowing capsules from a common over-the-counter brand, the mind races toward tampering, toward a faceless saboteur moving through stores, toward the memory of prior nationwide terror. The domestic killer counts on that reflex. The incident has been designed not merely to kill, but to point suspicion away from the home. That design shapes the immediate aftermath. Once the collapse occurs, the household becomes both crime scene and performance space. The spouse who knows more than everyone else may speak the right words at the right moments. There may be alarm or the notation of alarm. There may be readiness to connect the death to recently purchased medicine. There may be subtle steering of attention toward the bottle, toward the brand, toward the idea of random contamination. Even when no one consciously suspects deception yet, the incident is already being framed. The killer's great hope is that the body will become evidence for a false story first and a true story only later. In that gap between stories, time can be purchased, insurance can be considered, sympathy can be harvested, investigators can be delayed. The dead cannot protest the narrative being built around them. They can only lie where the incident has left them, bodies transformed by chemistry into arguments awaiting interpretation. And yet the body has its own stubborn testimony. Poison is silent going in, but not always silent afterward. The speed of collapse, the pattern of symptoms, the clustering of cases, the toxicology when someone finally asks the right question, all begin to push back against the false story. But that belongs to investigation. At the level of incident, what remains is a sequence of ordinary spaces invaded by invisible intention. A kitchen where someone asked for water. A bedroom where someone sat down because they felt weak. A bathroom where a body was found on tow. An ambulance ride lit by passing signals. A hospital corridor where shoes squeaked on polished floor, and a spouse waited with a face arranged into concern. A second home where a stranger opened a bottle bought in trust. A third home where another stranger did the same. One poison, many scenes, all linked by the cruel intelligence of the plan. And threading through every scene is the same unbearable contrast between what the victim thought was happening and what was actually taking place. The victim thought this was relief, or, at worst, ordinary illness. The victim thought a headache was a headache, a cold was a cold, a capsule was a capsule. The victim thought the home was the place where vulnerability could be managed, not exploited. The victim thought the person nearby, if there was such a person, belonged to the category of help. The incident destroys all of that in minutes. It strips objects of innocence and rooms of safety. It turns a bottle cap into the sound that begins a death scene. It turns a spouse into a possible architect of collapse. It turns the body itself into contested territory, first overwhelmed by poison, then claimed by a false explanation, then eventually recovered by truth only after the fact. That is why the incident in these cases feels less like a single moment than like a trap springing shut around the everyday. Everything ordinary remains visible right up until the instant it is no longer trustworthy. The house still looks like a house. The medicine still looks like medicine. The concern still sounds like concern. But beneath those surfaces the event has already become murder. And by the time anyone in the room fully understands that word belongs there, the victim is often already beyond being told. The crime scene in a Tylenol-style domestic poisoning case is almost always deceptive at first glance, and that deception is part of the design. It does not announce itself in the language people associate with homicide. There is no doorway splintered inward, no blood thrown across a wall, No weapon lying dropped in panic beside the body. The room is often too intact, too civilized, too undisturbed. A cup may still be standing upright. A towel may still hang neatly where it belongs. The air may smell not of violence, but of coffee, soap, carpet, and whatever trace of morning or evening drifted in through the window before everything changed. That false calm is the first clue. Though it rarely feels like a clue in the beginning, it feels instead like confusion. Someone has collapsed in a room where nothing appears to have happened. The body is in crisis, but the environment is innocent-looking. That mismatch is what investigators eventually learn to distrust. In the 1982 Chicago Tylenol murders, police concluded that the capsules had been tampered with after reaching store shelves, not during manufacturing, because the contaminated bottles traced back to products made at different plants in Pennsylvania and Texas. That realization established the template for later product tampering investigations. The scene of the body might be a home, but the hidden scene of the crime could lie elsewhere, in a bottle already altered before it ever entered the victim's hand. Wikipedia won in the later domestic copycat cases, however. The real geography was even more treacherous. The home was not merely where the victim died. It was often where the plan had been completed, the poison introduced, and the normal appearance of domestic life carefully preserved for discovery. Consider what investigators in Washington state encountered when the Excedrin poisoning surfaced in 1986. Bruce Nichol, according to later accounts, came home with a headache on June 5th and took 4 extra-strength Excedrin capsules from a bottle in his house before collapsing minutes later. He died shortly afterward at Harborview Medical Center, and his death was initially attributed to natural causes associated with emphysema. Only after a second death less than a week later did authorities begin to understand that something far stranger had occurred. Wikipedia, too, that initial misreading is crucial. It tells us what the first crime scene looked like to the people standing in it, not a murder scene, but a sudden medical emergency. The body gave them distress, but the room gave them no obvious reason. The first clue, then, was not visual but temporal. A healthy enough person complains of a common symptom, takes familiar medicine, and deteriorates with a speed that ordinary illness struggles to explain. When poison is hidden in capsules, especially cyanide, the violence is chemical rather than theatrical. It erupts inside the body while leaving the room almost untouched. For responders and physicians, that creates a troubling split between appearance and reality. The victim can be dying from an intentional act while everything around them insists on accident, natural collapse, or inexplicable misfortune. The second Excedrin death changed that. On June 11, 1986, Sue Snow took 2 Excedrin capsules for an early morning headache, while her husband also took capsules from the same bottle for arthritis and went to work. At around 6:30 in the morning, their 15-year-old daughter Haley found Snow collapsed on the bathroom floor and responsive, with only a faint pulse. Snow was taken to Harborview Medical Center and died later that day without regaining consciousness. During the autopsy, Assistant Medical Examiner Jeanne Miller reportedly detected the odor of bitter almonds, a classic sign associated with cyanide, and testing confirmed acute cyanide poisoning. Investigators then examined the Excedrin bottle from the Snow Webking home and found that 3 of the remaining capsules in the 60-capsule bottle were laced with toxic quantities of cyanide. Wikipedia, too, that sequence transformed the meaning of the scene. The bathroom floor was no longer simply the place where a woman had collapsed. It became part of a poisoning tableau, and the medicine bottle ceased to be background clutter. It became central evidence. In product tampering cases, the most important clue often sits in plain sight near the sink, on a bedroom table, in a cabinet, or on a kitchen counter. The bottle is so ordinary that people overlook it until a medical examiner or toxicologist forces the question. Once that question is asked, the home begins to rearrange itself in investigative terms. The glass of water matters, the cap matters, The remaining capsules matter, the lot number printed on the label matters, the packaging condition matters. Whether the foil seal appears broken cleanly or irregularly matters. Whether the bottle came from a recent purchase or had been sitting open in the house matters. The crime scene expands from the body upward into a web of household objects that would never have seemed narratively important before the poisoning. One of the earliest and most telling clues in the Nichol case came from that interplay between medicine and chronology. After publicity about Snow's death, Stella Nichol came forward on June 19th and told police that her husband had also died suddenly after taking Excedrin from a bottle with the same lot number as the one involved in Snow's death. FDA testing later confirmed cyanide in Bruce Nichol's remains and in Excedrin bottles Stella turned over to police. Wikipedia, too, on the surface, that appeared cooperative, even helpful. But from an investigative standpoint, it did something much larger. It linked to deaths, to homes, and to medicine bottles into one emerging pattern. The clue was not only the cyanide itself, it was the recurrence. Recurrence is what turns tragedy into investigation. One sudden death can be a medical puzzle. Two nearly identical deaths tied to the same kind of over-the-counter capsules become a warning. Once that warning sounds, investigators stop reading the home as an isolated place of collapse and start reading it as one node in a wider map. At first, suspicion in Washington reportedly drifted toward Bristol-Myers, the maker of Excedrin, because the product itself seemed to be the common denominator. The company recalled Excedrin in the Seattle area and then widened the recall. Authorities and companies offered large rewards. Public alarm intensified. Yet the FDA inspection of the plant where the tainted lot was packaged did not uncover cyanide contamination at the source. Wikipedia, too, that negative finding was itself an initial clue of immense importance. When the manufacturing line does not explain the poison, investigators must look elsewhere, and elsewhere in a tampering case means the end of the product's journey, the store shelf, the purchaser, the household, the people nearest the bottle. In other words, the crime scene begins to move backward. It starts with a body on a bathroom floor or a man collapsing after taking pain medication, then travels to the bottle, then to the store, then back again to the people who had access to the capsules after purchase. That reversal is one reason these cases are so unnerving. The most important clue may be neither dramatic nor hidden. It may be a perfectly common object whose significance appears only after laboratory chemistry contradicts the comforting story the room first told. The FBI crime lab found another strange clue in the contaminated Washington bottles. Along with cyanide powder, the poisoned capsules contained flecks of an unknown green substance. Further testing identified the material as an algaecide used in home aquariums, sold under the brand name Algae Destroyer. Wikipedia, to this detail, has the eerie precision of a detective novel, but in real life it mattered because it narrowed the world. Cyanide alone might suggest any number of access points. Cyanide mixed with a distinctive green aquarium chemical suggested handling, contamination, and possibly a domestic environment where such a product might be present. It also told investigators that the poisoner had not acted with perfect technical cleanliness. Some trace of the preparation process had ridden along inside the capsules. That is often how initial clues behave in poisoning cases. The killer depends on invisibility, yet the act of preparation creates residue, pattern, or inconsistency. The bottle can look ordinary from across the room, but under forensic scrutiny it begins to reveal that someone has been inside it. Another early clue in the Nichol investigation came from packaging logic itself. At the time, Excedrin was sold in plastic bottles sealed at the mouth with foil, and with the lid secured by plastic wrap. Once investigators ruled out factory contamination, they began focusing on the end users of the product. Both Paul Webking and Stella Nichol were asked to take polygraph examinations. Webking complied. Nichol at first declined, later submitted, and reportedly failed. deepening investigative interest in her. Wikipedia to polygraphs do not solve cases, but in a narrative sense they often function as directional clues. They tell detectives where to apply pressure when the physical scene alone remains ambiguous. In a poisoning case, especially one staged to resemble random tampering, that direction matters because the scene is built to send investigators outward. Any clue that points them back inward, toward the household or toward someone close to the victim, begins to unravel the disguise. The earlier Chicago murders had already taught authorities what random-looking tampering could look like at scale: 7 deaths in the metropolitan area, cyanide-filled Tylenol capsules, contaminated bottles traced to different manufacturing plants, and the resulting conclusion that someone had taken bottles from local store shelves, poisoned them, and returned them for unsuspecting consumers to buy. Wikipedia won that model haunted later investigations. It was the template prosecutors believed copycats were trying to exploit. So, one of the earliest clues in any suspected copycat case was not a chemical one at all, but a contextual one. Does this pattern truly resemble random public tampering? Or is someone trying very hard to make it resemble that? In the domestic copycat scenario, the killer needs the scene to perform randomness. But real randomness is messy. It produces distribution patterns, store connections, lot connections, victim dispersal. A staged domestic poisoning has to imitate all of that convincingly, and the strain of that imitation often produces clues. Why this household first? Why this spouse? Why these insurance questions? Why this timing? Why did the supposedly random tainted bottle appear where it did? Why did one person in the household die while another narrative conveniently emerged afterward? Those are not clues visible in a single photograph of a crime scene, but they are initial clues all the same, because they arise from the first effort to reconcile physical evidence with lived relationships. The Joseph Melling Sudafed case followed a similarly chilling logic. Prosecutors later argued that Melling poisoned Sudafed capsules in an attempt to kill his wife Jennifer for insurance money and planted additional poison packages so the crime would appear to be another wave of anonymous consumer tampering. Jennifer survived, while Kathleen Danaker and Stanley McWhorter died after taking tainted Sudafed capsules in 1991. Wikipedia won even without going line by line through that later investigation. The underlying crime scene lesson remains the same. The body of the intended spouse does not tell its full story alone. The initial clues emerge when investigators compare private collapse with public spread, intended victim with stranger victim, household access with product distribution. In such cases, every home where a victim falls becomes a partial scene, but the true scene is composite. It includes the domestic space, the bottle, the pharmacy shelf, the lot number, the lab bench, the autopsy room, and the hidden personal motive that the poisoner hoped no one would ever see. What makes the crime scene in these cases so emotionally chilling is that it looks like the end of safety rather than the site of violence. A bathroom, a kitchen, a bedside table, a medicine cabinet. These are places designed for maintenance, privacy, and care. When investigators finally recognize them as stages for murder, the recognition carries a moral shock beyond the technical one. The clues do not merely solve a death. They expose how the everyday has been used as camouflage. The bitter almond odor during autopsy, the cyanide in the remaining capsules, the matching lot numbers, the recall that follows, the green algaecide flecks, the factory inspection that rules out source contamination, the focus on end users, the emerging suspicions around a spouse. All of these details matter because they show truth pushing slowly upward through a scene built to suppress it. Wikipedia too at the beginning, the room says almost nothing. A body has fallen where bodies should not fall. A family is terrified. The bottle looks banal. But then the clues begin to gather, one by one, until the silence of the room becomes impossible to trust. What first appeared to be sudden illness hardens into poisoning. What first appeared to be random contamination begins to reveal human intention. And what first appeared to be a home interrupted by bad luck becomes something far darker, a domestic world whose ordinary surfaces were used to conceal a calculated death. The investigation began in the worst possible atmosphere for clear thinking, fear moving faster than proof. By the time Washington authorities understood that Sue Snow had died from cyanide in June 1986, the state was no longer looking at a solitary, bewildering medical collapse inside a private home. It was looking at the possibility of a public poisoning panic, the kind of nightmare the United States had already learned to dread after the 1982 Chicago Tylenol murders. When cyanide-laced capsules killed 7 people and taught both investigators and ordinary consumers that murder could hide inside a medicine bottle bought in trust, that memory shaped everything. It shaped the questions police asked first, the way companies responded, the way the public imagined the danger, and the way the real killer hoped the story would unfold. When investigators found that 3 of the remaining capsules in the Excedrin bottle from the Snow Webking home contained toxic quantities of cyanide, the immediate logic pointed outward, towards stores, manufacturers, shelves, shipping lines, unknown hands in anonymous public spaces. Then another tainted bottle from the same lot turned up in a grocery store in nearby Kent, and the fear widened. Excedrin manufacturer Bristol-Myers responded with a major recall in the Seattle area, later expanding the effort, while a coalition of drug companies offered a large reward. Washington state imposed a 90-day ban on the sale of non-prescription medication in capsules. The atmosphere was electric with public alarm, the kind of alarm that presses investigators to move quickly even as it tempts them toward the broadest and most dramatic interpretation. Somewhere in that widening panic lay the killer's hope. If enough people believed the region was facing another faceless tampering spree, then one husband's death could dissolve into the crowd. Bruce Nichols' earlier collapse,